Our view of Arctic is distorted, not only by maps, but also by representation. We often imagine Arctic as this hostile, cold desert of ice and icebergs. However, there are people living there, and if 4 million people currently live in the Arctic Circle, around 10% of them are what are being called Circumpolar people, mostly indigenous people from different migration waves since the exit from Africa. They are also erased not only by this representation but also how we imagine the world, and in our case through states. There are no real states that represents Arctic people in general. Most Arctic Circle states are in a majority populated by either European or Asian origins, but we don't see a state dedicated to Inuits, for example, or if they often have designated places, reserves, and autonomous republic, they do not really reach the rank of state actor. In this video we are going to explore 3 different types of Arctic indigenous people in order not to only understand who populates this region, but also what can be learned by their culture and tradition. I am not an anthropologist, so this episode will be perhaps even more vulgarized than the rest of this series. However, I think that as scholars we are meant to explore things that we do not particularly master. In that case, let us start by perhaps the most well-known people of European Arctic. Sami are the circumpolar population found in the Scandinavian peninsula. They are from a Finno-Ugrian origin, and just like other circumpolar populations, their contact with mainland Europeans have completely changed their lifestyle. As it is often recurring in this population, without access to agriculture, they often rely on herding, animal husbandry such as reindeers. Contrary to sedentary population who had access to agriculture, circumpolar population are often quite few, and nowadays there are only less than 100,000 Sami in the world, concentrated in Norway, for example. From a Westphalian perspective, their vision of the world can be seen as strange, as they do not consider borders and states like modern pragmatic states do. And this is already an obstacle that can lead to tension between Europeans and Sami. However, this has been fixed through the absence of border between the 3 countries of Scandinavia, for example. However, like many indigenous populations, they have the curse of living on a rich land, notably the mineral rich land of Sweden, but also the impressive forest found in the 3 other countries. With such opposing view, it is difficult for Sami to enter political life the same way as other populations. And even if in Norway, for example, they benefit of their own parliaments, this is only a consultative organization rather than something able to legislation. Still, this is a way to protect Sami culture and language. I think that it is important to listen to indigenous voices in the region and also understand their culture and philosophy in order, maybe not to find clear solution, but mostly elements of responses for future challenges, especially regarding sustainable use of land, as should Arctic be exploited in the current mindset shared by coastal powers, this could lead to a very fast and extremely damaging exploitation of the region. And while the region was often understood as a way to externalize from other problems, exploiting it so fast would only temporize the problem for a very, very short time. Found in the Republic of Sakha, Yakuts represent one of the many Arctic populations of Russia. Contrary to Sami, who were Finno-Ugrian, Yakuts are a Turkic population. They were notably encountered by European and particularly Russian during the Siberian expansion. Russians had often to rely on local chieftains, but also on the Yakuts people themselves to colonize Siberia. And if this colonization had cultural elements such as the expansion of orthodoxy, the Yakut people have kept their Tengrist and shamanistic tradition to a certain extent. Like many Turkic population found in Asia, their lifestyle was mostly nomadic and relied on animal husbandry such as horses and reindeers. Their link to pathfinding was notably used by the Soviet Union during World War II, where some famous snipers were from Yakuts origins such as Hokkyoku Fyodor, which was one of the deadliest snipers of the war, recognized as a war hero for his action. This heroization of a minority in a country mostly populated by Russians helps keeping the narrative of Russia being a multicultural state that respects culture, and if cultures are indeed protected, this is also a way to hide the colonial past of Russia in this region. As culturally protected as they can be, they are not protected from the effect of climate change in the region, and especially since their place of living are in a region covered by permafrost, which upon melting releases methane in the atmosphere. It often also releases frozen viruses such as anthrax, and this can be extremely damaging for populations who rely on reindeer population for their sustenance. Contrary to the next population we are going to see, their impact on sustainable development is hard to measure at the moment, as the population is quite depoliticized by Central Russian power, who, despite being a federation, is quite centralized on energy related issues. Still, at least, they represent a symptom of global warming and exploitation of the region, where traditional lifestyle is severely impacted by way less sustainable practices that could lead to even more damages in the future. Inuits represent the circumpolar population in the American continent, notably found in Canada and Greenland. Contrary to the two other populations we have seen, their settlement is quite recent, as America was the last populated continent by Homo sapiens. It is particularly with European colonization, especially Scandinavian one, that Inuits have entered history, however not in the sanest way, bringing disease and also altering their lifestyle that was sometimes nomadic to adopt more sedentary practices. If Inuits haven't known what is understood as genocide in the general sense, like we find in the Holocaust, we can still find genocidal elements in forced sterilization or child abduction. And if more important case can be found in the US or in Canada, Denmark is far from innocent in this part of history, and even nowadays there are still problems that can be linked with cultural genocide, such as problem regarding motherhood in Inuit population, where Danish authorities sometimes cannot understand the cultural differences, leading to Inuit mother being called insensitive and having mental trouble, whereas this is simply their expression that's very different from continental Europeans. Inuits are not a monolithic population. We can already see differences between those found in Canada and Greenland. Nowadays they are represented by a non-governmental council. Still, this represents a sort of politicide of their population, as they don't have any government that fully represents them, which doesn't allow for very effective defense of their interest. You may have seen how the US administration under Donald Trump attempted to seize Greenland and pressuring Denmark. The impact of globalized civilization can be seen as quite negative on Inuits' lifestyle. For example, due to the absence of agriculture, Inuits have to rely on fishery. However, with acidification and other forms of pollution, their food gets poisoned quite often, leading to disease. However, this population are also at the vanguard of innovation and can help us understand sustainable ways of continuing our civilization, such as wind power or hydroelectricity in Canada. Having what is often understood as traditional societies using modern technology can be seen as quite strange from especially urbanized population, who would expect Inuits to still live in igloo, whereas they have adopted the Western comfort almost entirely. Overall, as we have seen in this video, if these people have different origins, rights and culture, they share similarities in how they were treated by the ruling powers in place. The absence of circumpolar people proper states, despite Greenland's existence, can be qualified of politicide. Since the Treaty of Westphalia, the world has been understood almost exclusively through the lens of statehood, and their absence in circumpolar people makes them even more vulnerable to exploitation and, as we have seen, also genocide, particularly cultural one. However, as exploited as they can be, we shouldn't observe them as what can be called as the good savage, that would be only a recreation of this phenomenon of fossil people. However, due to their knowledge of the region and their often sustainable practices, studying them for even economic exploitation of the region could be interesting, if not crucial, for the sustainability of other operations in Arctic Circle. Still, what would be difficult here is finding a proper balance between indigenous population and the rest of mankind. Perhaps one of the most dangerous traps is to put an opposition between the two and basically looking at these people as roadblocks rather than other fellow humans that have interests that can be shared or opposed. Concerning the Japanese case, Japan has the potential to put indigenous interest at its own benefits should it study them more deeply. For Japan, there is one advantage we can find in this situation around cooperation with different people. Unlike what happened to JICA in the recent weeks, there are no specific racial frameworks used by netizens against circumpolar people, contrary to Indian and sub-Saharan people. Therefore, there is a way less important risk of destabilization from an outside perspective regarding cooperation. However, this is mitigated by the fact that Japanese own indigenous population has not been treated in the best way, notably Yakuts but also Inuit people, which are closer to Arctic Circle people. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I imagine that I will do a small pause in the videos to make more qualitative content over quantity. Until then, see you next time.